A member of the Labour Party. Third is Fleur Robinson, who's representing the Liberal Democrat Party. This is Alex Scott, of the representing the Conservative line.
Nasty man!
And this is Ryan Earl from Citizens UK, a non-partisan alliance of groups, pressure groups, advocating change in Britain. They respond to things like living wage and ending child detention, all that kind of thing. So if you can welcome them all with an applause, please, that would be great. And I'm about to show I'm hosting. Right, now, how it's going to work is we're going to have certain set questions, but during the discussion, if anyone says something you disagree with or you want to contest, if you put your hand up, heckle if you really have to, but please don't. Then you can put your hand up and you can give your own contribution, and you can even ask your questions to people on the panel for their own personal for things they may have said. Is that okay? Alright, who's got question number one? Right.
Question number one. To what extent has this coalition shown us how politically disunited and polarised the British public are?
Thank you, Francis. Now this is the issue that in 2010 after the election we saw how disunited the public were, that they couldn't elect one majority party. Therefore in this last year we've seen the kind of balance between Conservative and Liberal Democrat ideology. Alex Scott, how effective has this coalition government been?
I think that we came into the coalition aiming to effectively sort out the mess that the Labour left, sort out the economy, and I think that now, looking back, that we've done that. That if you want to look at stuff like employment, that 700,000 more people are in jobs than when we started the coalition. The economy is now growing again, and we're seeing that austerity has worked, and that we're seeing that the coalition has been effective.
It's worth saying that since we're looking at 2013, I don't want to hear the lines Labour government unless it's entirely necessary. Chris Williams, if the economy is doing so well, what's the need to vote in Labour in the next general election?
Well, it didn't take long for them to say their usual Labour mess, did it? I think Labour government in 2015, well, we believe, opposed to the Conservatives, that we believe in a stimulus package. So rather than trying to cut welfare hugely, things like this, and essentially converting our economy from a mixed economy into a almost entirely private sector economy, we believe that we have to still endorse public services, and we should try and make them, rather than simply cutting from them, we should make them more efficient.
Do you think George Osborne has fulfilled his promises of helping the economy, and as I quote, he said making it a more healthy environment for British citizens in the UK? Surely he's fulfilled his promises.
I don't think he's made it a more healthy environment for British citizens in the UK, no, definitely not. I mean, we've already seen living standards have gone down hugely since the Conservative government came in. I think the only people who are in a healthy environment are the millionaires who are getting their tax cuts, which, you know, I mean, George Osborne being one of them. It's a nice little face you got there. The thing is, though, the British public, I think the question originally was about them being very polarised. They are, and the parties are definitely moving apart, I think we'll agree, but the fact is that we're more concerned with the public, whereas the Conservatives are more concerned with their businesses.
In terms of that minority states, Ryan, would you say that people have become more and more disenfranchised with politicians, which is why majority parties are failing to get majority governments?
I would agree. I think this year we've seen a real increase in the member activity from within our alliances. I mean, we had later on in 2013 we had Russell Brand coming out and pretty much telling people not to vote, sort of disenfranchising the youth essentially. And what we show is that there is an alternative way to work with the establishment, to work with political parties to get change. I think, and that shows that, you know, there is still hope for democracy in this country. The fact that pressure groups do have an influence. I think Citizens UK are a prime example of a pressure group who represent, you know, the vast majority of civil society and are able to get change.
Okay, citizens are great. Got it. Now, Fleur Robinson. This current government, nobody voted for. How effective have the Liberal Democrats actually been in government?
I would say that the Liberal Democrats have been more effective than the public knows, because they've blocked Tory policies such as running schools for profit. They've also blocked the Tories wanting to get rid of the Human Rights Act, and inheritance tax cut for millionaires. And as well as this, the Lib Dems have actually implemented a lot of their own manifestos, such as no income tax on those earning less than £10,000, which is a pure Lib Dem policy. And they've also stopped the Tories from scrapping house benefits for under the age of 25.
So by this reasoning, a Liberal Democrat government within the next government 2015 election is in our interest then?
A coalition is definitely in your interests.
Ian Waller, you're from a UKIP background. When you look at the way 2013 has been with scandals like Plebgate and all sorts of information we found out about MPs, especially looking at recently we found the government have spent something like £10,000 for sessions with the Royal Academy of Drama Institute, in which they learn about how oratory skills and how to be more dramatic in their speeches. When you look from UKIP, when you look at how failed these politicians seem to be in terms of how they relate to their people, how do you approach the issue of looking at government and their effectiveness?
Well, I think overall my opinion on this government so far is that the fact that it is so polarised, these two parties really do not have that much in common. That it's just meant that they've been cancelling each other out on anything important, and it's essentially almost going to be a wasted 5 years where nothing of that much significance has actually happened.
I'll give it to Chris in a second, but do you think a Liberal, Democrat, Labour government would be more effective, or at least serve the people's interest in a greater degree?
I don't know whether I'd agree it would serve people's interests, however I do think they would probably get more done because they would agree on more things. But
Chris Williams, looking at last year, do you honestly think Labour can get elected on their own for the next government?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that.
Can you explain to me, since we are holding Ed Miliband as the future Prime Minister in this world, explain to us how that would appear? How would they be elected, looking at the current lack of support for the Labour Party?
Well, the Labour Party are ahead in the polls and have been for, I think, the last 1.5 years, so I think that's definitely evidence that we're still popular with the people. Definitely there was a certain amount of, after 2010, the election results clearly showed that there was a certain amount of trust lost in the Labour Party. However, I think that we are definitely working to try and rebuild that relationship with the community. For example, Ed Miliband is trying to focus on, as I'm sure you're all aware, our policies which are designed by Ed Miliband are focused on helping the people rather than essentially the majority rather than the minority. Sorry, and I think that is a very good way to try and avoid disenfranchising our public.
Actually, that's true.
Do I think what?
What you said about how effective a Labour government would be, it seems he's saying completely the opposite to what the Conservative Party is saying right now.
No, I don't think a Labour government would be effective because I think their idea of just employing, relying on kind of the public sector and keep on creating more kind of jobs like that. I think we should go back to the ideas of efficiency, the idea of you trim down the public sector and then we build up a bigger private sector that's going to be more efficient.
We'll get to Thatcher later, I can tell what you said there. Ryan, you work with a lot of young people. Looking at the Liberal Democrats, and you spoke about amending relations with the public, their flip-flopping has led to people to have a lack of support in them. Can you imagine Liberal Democrats gaining any more potential, any more influence, which they've sadly lost?
I think we, at the start of the coalition, we saw two things. We saw tuition fees rise, and we saw the education maintenance allowance scrapped. So I think that initially sort of put a lot of young people off of politics and off of the Liberal Democrats, because many Liberal Democrat MPs went over to schools and to community groups to pledge that they wouldn't be increasing tuition fees. Yet we saw that hike, with the vast majority of Liberal Democrat MPs who had their eyes on that cabinet job, voting for a rise in tuition fees. So I think it's difficult. It will be difficult for the Liberal Democrats to really be able to engage with their electorate. But I think they do have a chance of getting in coalition again. Because as you said, I don't think there'll be any clear winners at this moment in time. It looks unlikely. So hopefully, they'll make promises and keep them this time.
Are there any members of the audience who have a contribution to do with the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party, the Conservative Party? Anyone who has any contributions at all, any questions or anything they want to challenge which has been said? Some highly contentious things have been said.
Small issues. The reason we vote for our parties is for big contentious issues. On all those issues, it seems like the Conservatives have won over you. So what's the point of voting Liberal Democrats if there's only small little gains that they might win you?
Yeah, I agree, because we've abandoned, or the Lib Dems have abandoned their 4 key policies basically, but I think it was because the Conservatives and the Lib Dems have not much in common, and if we did work, initially the Lib Dems did want to make a coalition with Labour. Labour sort of didn't want to, so we had.
That's not true, actually.
So, yeah.
So what actually happened was the Liberal Democrats said that we would make a coalition of you if you change your leader. And we were, obviously, naturally, we were being led by Gordon Brown at the time. And the party as a whole undertook the decision that we weren't going to, abandon principle for votes or anything like that.
I will cut here, firstly because this is a matter of 2010, not 2013, and moreover, it seems we all have a different version of happening 3 years ago. Should we move on to question number 2? That's question number 2.
Has George Osborne failed or fulfilled his economic policies?
This is an important question because if you look at the apparent growth we've heard by some members of the panel, the prediction was 2.8% and we got 0.6%. And the prediction for 2012 of growth was 2.8%, whereas we got 0%. So my question to you, Alex Scott, is it merely chance that we've stumbled across this growth?
No, I don't think it's chance. I think that all the kind of we've said by principle that we should cut down the public sector, bring in the private sector, and that will give growth. Unfortunately, it's not as much as we'd hoped, but actually, if you look, we grew 0.8% in the last quarter, which actually is the highest in Europe. And in terms of the economy, a growth of 0.8% is huge. And now we're seeing the gains that austerity happened. We had the first initial hardship for the first couple of years, but now we're seeing the gains, and now lives are really going to improve, living standards are going to improve, and we're going to see the gains that George Osborne promised.
Chris Williams.
Okay, sorry, what was your question?
You started.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask who's feeling the gains right now. I think we've already established, inflation's going up faster than wages. People are becoming poorer, essentially. I understand, someone in the Tory party is going to feel the gains, that's for sure. But, Labour's attitude to the economy right now is very mixed because, as a party, we don't believe in simply distancing ourselves from other parties out of just for the sake of it. So we do agree on some things, but at the same time, we do feel that while they definitely achieved their economic ends, that we don't feel that their economic ends are definitely the right ones to go for, essentially.
Ian Waller.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Is that for Christopher B saying Ian Waller? Anyway, Ian Waller. George Osborne has recently said that he's going to continue his economic plan by cutting £25 billion for benefits. Do you think this is an accurate move for a person who's supposedly appealing to all citizens as well as rich and poor?
Well, I think George Osborne overall, he has the right idea, but he's just not quite going far enough. He's almost too scared to do anything that will actually help the economy. I don't know whether he's maybe being held back by the Lib Dems.
In benefits.
That's just proposed. Realistically, is he actually going to do that, or are the Lib Dems once again going to shut this down?
Lib Dems, are they going to shut this down? We hope so, right?
Yeah, the Lib Dems say that there should be higher tax on the wealthy, and they disagree with the bedroom subsidy, which is basically attacking the poorest in society. And again, I think the Lib Dems disagree with that the Conservatives passed the highest rate of the top rate of tax has been lowered again, and essentially the Tories are attacking the lowest in society.
Ryan O. In 2011, George Osborne said we have put fuel into the tank of the British economy. Are we now reaping the rewards in 2013?
I think we're yet to feel any gains from the Chancellor's economic policy. Talking about, you're going on about privatisation. £1.5 billion was lost by, the bodge job of privatising the Royal Mail. If that's anything to go by, I don't think we need to privatise anymore. saying that, with the not the bedroom tax, the universal tax credits that the government introduced, it's been said that it will only save the taxpayer £1 million every month. So, I mean, that compared to the £1.5 billion lost through the bad sale of the Royal Mail shows really where this government's priorities lie. I think on that as well, we've seen a rise in 2013 to 5.2 million people who pay less than the living wage. So, I mean, for the Chancellor to come out and say, you know, all work pays, it really doesn't. We've seen 1 million people in the labour market are now on 0-hour contracts. So it is at the moment it's about exploiting the workforce really to get some sort of economic growth, which we haven't even seen that.
Alex, I'm sure you want to answer. Before that, I found an irregularity in George Osborne's plan. I'm hoping you can justify it for us. He's claimed that with the savings which he makes with these public sector cuts, they can save £3 billion to put into the economy after they're re-elected. He thinks they will be in infrastructure for development. Whereas in the last 3 years, he's cut infrastructure development by 12.3%, £12.3 billion. Can you explain why the government doesn't seem to care that much about roads and buildings and transportation?
Well, I think on the contrary, the fact that we would put £3 billion in once re-elected.
And take 12.8 out first, though.
Well, you have to have the initial cut. That's what austerity is about. It's about cutting back initially, and then later on you reap the gains. And that's the whole principle of that. That at first we have to say, okay, we'd like to invest more in infrastructure, but we simply don't have the money. We don't have the funds. Thanks, Chris. So what we're doing is we're cutting.
Please continue.
I think you would have the funds if you sold the Royal Mail better.
Yeah, the point is, sold at the Royal Mail sold at 10 times, 10 times.
Or if you tax the highest paid in society.
Alex Scott, why is there so much debate over George Osborne's sanity?
George Osborne, what's sorry, I missed that.
I said sanity, but I'll rephrase his economic plan.
I think the idea is it's just kind of this long gone rhetoric that the Conservatives only help the rich and they don't help the poor people. I think that's long gone. I think that you might have seen that before, but in reality that's not the case anymore, and it's just handed down and kept on saying. In reality, we've seen lots of investment into small businesses, and we're really trying to push for small businesses, artisan businesses that are going to help local people and going to start build up. And we've had the income tax threshold, as mentioned, with Conservative support, which has been £2,000 to all those servants.
Sir Robinson, you're a Liberal Democrat. Would you oppose or agree with the current model, with the current thing Alex Scott just spoke about on businesses?
I definitely disagree, because business is still very capitalist, very Tory, and instead of taxing or increasing corporation tax on businesses, they're decreasing corporation tax, and as well as that, you're increasing VAT and decreasing their tax cuts on millionaires. They tried to get through inheritance tax cuts on millionaires, and you're just protecting your top class in society from having to pay into your...
Well, if I could respond, you said we were decreasing tax on business. That's precisely the point, and because the principle is that we help small businesses develop, and by doing that we are decreasing corporation tax so that it can help communities and help build up the economy. Again, that's the whole principle behind it.
This is somewhere where I'd agree wholeheartedly with Alex, actually. I think it's a very good idea to try and help small businesses and allow competition rather than having just a few big businesses at the top.
So Labour and Conservative agree. You're not going to get that again tonight. Any other questions or comments on what's been said? Yes.
To the Lib Dems, by increasing corporation tax and taxing millionaires, do you run the risk of running out the money that's providing our economy?
So could you ask the question again?
So by increasing corporation tax and taxing the rich, do you run out of do you have the problems of running out big companies out of
No.
money to the economy?
No, because they have loads of money. So
Economics for the Lib
They
Dems.
could go to different countries where
Sorry?
corporation tax is lower, so they can make more money. So you can move out big companies like HSBC, after that bank company.
Okay, it's interesting contributions. Right, let's move on to, let's look at a more, we're going to move on now, and we're going to look at a more international issue. Question number 3. Question number 3. As Has someone forgot the number 3? Yes.
Yeah. Does the mobility of labour...
One second. Could we please listen? Right.
Yeah, does the mobility...
Very well read out. It's a very interesting discussion. One point which keeps being mentioned is the mobility of labour issue. The fact that people, if we are a member of the EU, people can move around from member states from one to another for work and other purposes. Does this issue and does this privilege and with its its economic benefits mean that leaving the EU is no longer an economically viable option? Ian Waller.
Well, I think actually on the contrary, leaving the EU and therefore removing this, as you say, benefit, or as I would say, curse, would actually really benefit the economy. Simply, I mean, first of all, and I know everyone's going to say this is the same old line, but essentially, if more and more people are coming into this country, it's going to be harder for people to find jobs.
This is the same old line.
What we should be doing is introducing a system similar to Australia, where we only let in the people with the skills that we require.
But we do that at the moment, though.
But we are also letting in unskilled workers from the EU, which are filling jobs that could easily be filled by people in Britain.
Well then why are the majority of, looking at 2013, the majority of small businesses started by immigrants and people who have moved into the UK? Why is it that they have the initiative to open up their own businesses whilst British people have apparently lost that ability?
I think there is certainly an issue in that British people have almost become too lazy.
So then why are you blaming those who are not lazy?
I'm not blaming them. I'm simply saying if we removed that and made it so that those sort of services would not be provided unless someone took the job, it would encourage people to move into that sort of work. And in addition, I think people need to be re-educated so that they realise that it's not a question of you wait until you find a job that you like. It's a question of you find a job. It doesn't matter what job, you just take any old job. You don't sit around on benefits for years waiting for something that you like.
The vast, almost absolute majority of people on benefits, from statistics, are people who are born in Britain and have lived in Britain for most of their lives. Why does this EU issue bring out the Eurosceptic approach which we've seen in the past? Surely there's problems at home rather than problems abroad.
Well, I think there are problems at home, but they will be solved if we can just solely focus on our home
I've got it.
issues.
Chris Williams, what do you think?
I think regarding the European Union, you have to look at it from an economics perspective. Firstly, the free movement of labour, which was your initial point, is very important for businesses, and even if we left the EU, businesses would definitely push that forward, free movement of labour, because it's cheaper to get workers from abroad. That is just the simple fact, and because they will work for less. As well as this, I think you need to bear in mind the fact that in terms of trade, and I know what Ian's going to say here, he's going to say we could have all those trade agreements anyway, but he has to bear in mind the fact that there will be tariffs, common tariffs, which the EU does impose. It's a very protectionist system if you aren't in the EU, and we benefit from the fact that trade is a lot cheaper than if we were not in the EU. And if we try to seek a kind of system which you're probably going to suggest, where we have the Swiss option, where we're not in the EU but we still try and get trading benefits.
That's UKIP's line at the moment, yeah.
Sorry?
That's UKIP's current line.
Yes, exactly, which is known as the Swiss option. Again, it's simply not viable because the Swiss just get better. They don't get as good deals as they would if they were in the EU. And for example, when they try to trade with China, they end up getting trying to get hugely better deals essentially, and I think it's the Confederation of British Industries, which is the biggest lobbyist group of businesses for British businesses in the UK, for example, has tried to push this forward, that economically it's viable. And they did a survey where 8 out of 10 businesses would vote that we should stay in the EU, and that's the way I look at it.
Sorry, I can't pass this around more. We've got one last question to go through. Question number 4, whoever's got it, and you can contribute to this one.
I was wondering whether you thought David Cameron was right when he said Thatcher will be remembered as the greatest peacetime Prime Minister in the UK.
Alex Scott, give us your piece.
I think that now when we look back at Thatcher...
I'm only going to pay respects first.
Sure. As a Conservative Party, I believe as a nation we were very sad to hear of Thatcher's death.
Especially in the North.
Now, going on, I think that when you look back at Thatcher, that you can't say all she did was good, but I think that we could conclude the majority that she did well, and she did in the belief that it was better for Britain. I think the rest of my peers might say that the worst thing about it was in regards to mining, the privatisation. And while we may accept that would have happened on a slower basis, there should have been more provision for the people, that actually that was the direction the country should have been moving. And I think if we look around, I think Thatcher was kind of a fearless, kind of prominent figurehead for Britain, and I think kind of her work for Britain in regards to getting trade agreements, Falklands War and stuff like that, I think that really helped for Britain.
If you do hear something you disagree with, please do raise your hand during the discussion and punish someone for saying something you disagree with. Ryan, what do you think on the legacy of Thatcher?
Before we go to that, I wanted to come back to one point on the EU. I think it's great that you have UKIP here today, because you had one question that they could probably answer. I think they came out last week and said they're happy to sacrifice economic growth just in order to control immigration. Now we work with all three political parties, but I think a party that's only concern is immigration and stopping immigration and leaving the EU. I don't think I'm quite surprised actually to see them here on the panel. But going back to what was said about Thatcher, I think there are certain points that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but I think it's important to remember that she was still a human being, and we do have to respect.
She was a human being. The question is not whether she was a human being, I don't think. The question is how good a human being was she as our leader?
No, I mean, I'm going to quote an MP who works within our institutions. He said he responded to the people who were sort of kicking around this sort of head of Thatcher around Trafalgar Square. He said, these people are showing the same lack of compassion as Thatcherism. You beat Thatcherism by being better than it. So I think that shows, that we're always going to make mistakes, and Thatcher made several mistakes, but we can learn from that.
Good. Ian Waller. we have a couple of times, moment. Ian Waller, did she make many mistakes?
I don't actually think she did. I think she always had the interest of the nation in her. That was her main focus.
The main part of the nation?
Scotland.
Scottish part of the nation?
The nation as a whole. She was concerned on the benefits of the nation as a whole. Admittedly, in the short run, there may have been problems in certain parts of the nation, but she knew in the long run it would benefit.
Can you tell me how, closing down the mines and, introducing the poll tax was benefiting the nation as a whole?
Closing down the mines, it's essentially it comes down to privatisation is better, and it is much more efficient. It removes costs from the government. It allows us to focus on other areas. It's just a much better system. And the poll tax, I admit, is probably her one mistake. I forgot about that one. I think most people try to when they think Thatcher.
Quickly, yes. Make it quick, please.
You said privatisation was always better. If we look at the US and their healthcare system today, as opposed to our marvellous NHS, created by a post-time Prime Minister Clement Attlee, who, in my opinion, is far greater than Margaret Thatcher ever could be. How does privatisation still better then?
Okay. Essentially, I think what you were saying essentially comes down to is the American system better than ours or not? But essentially, I think it may not seem better from our point of view because we've got so used to this system of just being able to go to the hospital anytime we have any slight sort of anything wrong with us. But I think fundamentally it's a much fairer system in the sense that you pay for the treatment that you receive. You don't, because you get people who will be paying in for 20 or 30 years and never pay
We do have to move on. To conclude this discussion, we're going to have to conclude. I'll conclude it now by saying thank you very much for attending. I hope you gained a thing or two from this discussion. And if you'd like, please do question these gentlemen and lady outside. Thank you very much.